Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to this session 4 and the last session of Amber and BGA's Festival of Excellence. But don't worry, because we've got a fantastic panel to take you through the last hour of the conference, and we're going to be talking about leadership challenges and opportunities. In a second, I'll hand you over to Andrew Main-Wilson, CEO of Amber and BGA, who'll be chairing the panel to introduce the rest of the panelists. But just before we do, I just wanted to remind you of a couple of things. Firstly, just to remind you, this session is being recorded. So if you miss anything or you want to catch up on anything, we'll send you our recording within about a week of the event. And secondly, we all obviously want them to be as interactive as possible. As with all the other sessions, you'll see there's a Q&A box just at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So if you have any questions at all for the panelists, just pop them in and Andrew will try and get through them towards the end of the session. So I think that's all from me. Without any further ado, I'll hand over to Andrew Main-Wilson to start the conversation.
Thank you very much, David, and welcome to all of you from around the world. To give size and shape to the session, what I'm going to do is this. We're going to break the session into 4 15-minute slots. The first one, we'll look back at the last 12 months, the first anniversary of COVID, and I'm going to ask the panel about the most valuable lessons they've learned and what they've most admired about some of the ideas from their respective industries. Then the second session of 15 minutes, we're going to talk about management education and lifelong and just-in-time learning, how to make you stronger in your careers at this particular time. Then the third Q&A session with our 3 panelists, I'm going to ask them about employability and recruitment. At such a difficult time in COVID, how do you make yourself the best candidate for the job that you most want? And then finally, for the last 15 minutes, we're going to take your questions. So please do feed your questions throughout and we'll answer them at the end. So we've deliberately chosen multinational directors from 3 very different sectors to give variety, from financial services, from consulting, and from the charity sector. And I'm now going to ask each of our panelists, Elisabetta Galli, Rob McCargo, and David Sagawa, very briefly to introduce themselves. Elisabetta, starting with yourself, could you just give us 1 to 2 minutes of your career and what you do?
Yes, thank you so much. So, yeah, my name is Elisabetta Galli. I am Italian and I am a clinical psychologist as a background. And I actually work as a clinical psychologist at the very beginning of my career. And this has been very useful to me because I still pick on this experience from time to time. And it's been really very useful, especially in this COVID time. And then I entered the corporate environment and I spent more than 25 years in big multinational companies, always in HR, covering different positions, and very often regional and global positions. I have been working 11 years in Johnson & Johnson into different sectors, pharma mainly, but also medical devices. And then I've been working in Wolters Kluwer, that is a company delivering services to professionals. And in the 4 years in which I worked with them, we went through a fantastic digital transformation, moving from print paper to fully digital. It has been a fantastic experience for me. And then the last experience in Banco Santander as global head of training, development, and talent management. 4 fantastic years, again, another challenge related to thorough transformation of the business model, moving from being a bank, a traditional bank, to be one of the best or the best open financial services platform. So a big jump in terms of transformation. Sometimes I call it revolution. And now I am here today to hopefully share my experiences and my thoughts with you with great pleasure.
Thank you, Elisabetta. Rob, would you tell us briefly about your role at PwC?
Yes, thanks, Andrew, and a great opportunity to speak to the team here today. I've had a really circuitous career. I was a microbiologist. I was an executive search consultant, so I know a bit about the sort of recruitment market. I even worked in humanitarian emergency response on the Ebola outbreak, so I'm even an expert in the pandemics environment, although don't test me on any of the details now. I've been working with PwC for the last 6 years, and as You may know we're a 300,000 person global professional services organization. And my role as Director of Artificial Intelligence sees me working with teams internally to apply the technology to our internal problems, but also working with our clients across all sectors to start harnessing the incredible power of this technology. But coming from more of a kind of a people and workforce background, my particular focus is on the people impact of the technology. How do we account for things like the ethical implications? How do we get the regulations right? How do we do this in a way that allows you to upskill the workforce at the same pace as the technology is starting to evolve? So super exciting sort of part of the equation between the technology, the people, and the place. I've also got a few hats externally. I was recently appointed as honorary visiting fellow at and work on a number of boards in the sort of the application of AI into the world of policy and national strategy at governmental level.
Thanks very much, Rob. David, tell us in particular about your key role at Oxfam International.
First of all, a great good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Yes, David Segal is my name, as mentioned. At the moment, the Global Chief People and Culture Officer at Living Goods, which is a community health organization doing programming in Africa, but with teams across several continents. Before that, I was with Oxfam as the Global Director for People. Oxfam, which spans 90 countries and about 20 affiliates, and was always great to see the impact that an organization can actually deliver in some of the truly emerging critical areas like gender justice, economic justice, and of course climate justice. But before that, I've worked in the private sector to a large extent, and with some big names like the Coca-Cola Company, Unilever, Airtel International, the Standard Bank of South Africa. So I come into this conversation with a relatively good balance of experiences in the development sector, but as well the private sector. And I've been able to lead some business transformations, but also have demonstrated some reasonable level of strategic leadership in human resources.
All right, very good. Thank you, David. So the first question I'm going to put to you is what's the biggest single thing you've learned that has been a benefit in running your business during this very difficult last 12 months? Elisabetta, if I may, let's start with you.
Well, what I have learned is that people can get adapted to everything. And this has been really a big challenge for us. So you can imagine when we started the big lockdown last year, at the beginning of the pandemic, basically what happened in my company is that in 24 hours, basically, everyone was working at home. So this implied a huge effort from the IT people, really great people with a great professionalism. But this implied that a critical mass of people in Santander had to get adapted to work in a completely different environment. And I think that it has been difficult for many people, especially people who normally said no, I don't like technology, or they simply didn't know how to manage a Zoom connection, something like that. So they had to get adapted to that. And what I observed directly is that they managed, they succeeded. And so for me, has been a kind of big lesson learned. Everyone, literally everyone, can get adapted and take the best out of a situation that apparently is very difficult, tough, and seems impossible to manage. And another important learning for me is that, thanks God, we have the technology, because technology really saved us and permitted us to continue to work, to give continuity to the business, to the relationship with our teams, with our customers. And this has been really a great insight, a great aha moment for many of us. So recognizing the power of technology in this situation.
So Elisabetta, if we look at the situation today, the COVID resolution looks very uncertain at the moment. Uncertainty of the vaccine rollout, new strains. What would be your biggest concern if all Santander staff maybe had to work remotely for another 12 months from home?
Well, the biggest concern to me is the psychological status of the employees. So the more I talk to people and I try to listen and to understand what can be the real problems my teams and other people in the company are living in this moment, is the enormous psychological pressure of living in lockdown and managing uncertainty, looking at the future without knowing very well what is going to happen, and also being very concerned for their own health or the health of their parents, etc., the relatives. And this, together with the fact that you are basically locked in your house and also moving around is not so easy, really creates a kind of surreal situation. You feel yourself like in a kind of bubble, and so everything really comes to the surface, and it's like exaggerated. So an emotion that you could manage in a very easy way in a normal situation, now it's becoming really big and appears, let's say, more difficult than it is normally. So what I notice is a big emotional pressure in our people, and the concern is to take care in a very, very consistent way of the well-being of the employees. Probably it's the first time in which a big company is really so focused in understanding what are the problems of employees and being really willing to take care of it.
Thank you. Yeah, quite agree. Rob, your biggest learning, the thing you've been most impressed with at PwC these last 12 months?
I mean, first thing to say, I'd agree with everything that Elisabetta said. Technology, ability to pivot immediately to a remote setting, all was extraordinary to see. And I think we can celebrate the accomplishments of the back office, Elisabetta, in these enterprises, can't we? I'll try to add to a few points that I think I've noticed. It's been an extraordinary time to innovate. The bureaucracy, the inertia, the reasons why we shouldn't not innovate. You know, there's now an existential threat if you do not innovate. So this has brought forward things that have been on the technology roadmap several years down the line to immediate front and center. So we've been able to do things that we were desperate to do for several years, and now have the permission to ideate, innovate, challenge, and do things differently. So that's been, you know, one of the many positives, I think, of a really terribly bad situation. I think I'm building upon Elisabetta's point around the workforce. I think it's been crucial to do a few things. I think communication has been absolutely vital. Our chairman has ran a regular number of town halls. We've had clinical psychologists like your cohort, Elisabetta, speaking to the staff, destigmatizing anything about, you know, the way you're feeling. It's natural to feel how you are, and trying to open up conversations across the organization globally. I think the other thing I think I'd want to talk about is this concept of purpose, corporate purpose. I know it's something David have heard speak about before, and I know it's a big focus in Banco Santander, Elisabetta. Many people in organizations have spoken to this lofty vision of purpose for a number of years now, but purpose, I think, during the pandemic is something that has really come to the surface. How do you genuinely live your corporate purpose? What do you stand for in terms of values? And I think the decisions that leaders have made over the last 12 months will be judged very, very closely over the next few years. How did you look after your staff? How did you look after people that were made redundant? We managed to protect our jobs in the UK. How did you fulfill your purpose to your customer base? And I think a lot of people made some poor decisions that misaligned with their purpose that is going to come back and haunt them in the years to come. So I think purpose is a really interesting concept for us to get into today as well.
Very good, thanks, Rob. David, what has most impressed you over the last 12 months?
Yeah, I think first, even as I agree with what Elisabetta and Robert have just said, because they really apply to almost all organizations, I think for me it has really been to see how many business leaders have grown. And I must say, I've seen changes in the way people lead and people are led, that I think this is going to be sustainable in the future, and that is a very good development. And I see three key flavors of leadership that have been dialed up. The first one is what I would say is, adaptive intelligence. you think about it, the kind of uncertainties we deal with every day, I think most of the organizations, and it is applied to us in a big way, we've only been able to have line of sight of probably what, 3 months to 6 months plans. We kind of threw the long-term plans through the window, and we said we will comfortably, in a way, try to be comfortable with uncertainties so that we could even course correct every week, every other 2 weeks. And that was okay, because the unknowns were just so many in the air that that's the best thing you could do. And so from short-term, planning cycles to actually appreciating that you could have wins on a weekly basis and celebrate those, and keep encouraging the teams to keep, going for gold over short spans of time was very helpful. But the second flavor of intelligence that has come in is really contextual intelligence. I think this is a time when we've realized that you can never have a recipe that applies to all your markets. And business leaders will talk to this, because you realize that even within one country, the contexts are so different that you have to keep rethinking and reimagining the solutions for each location. And that is okay, because ultimately, for the first time, the rule is changing, that the sum of a parts could actually be bigger than all. And we've seen that apply in many businesses. And so really brilliant leadership changes that we're seeing in that space. The third one is, of course, emotional intelligence. I think we've seen some of the most arrogant leaders, becoming very humbled, and of course, caring about the employees because they have no choice but to do that. But even acknowledging that they don't know what they don't know, and that actually the most junior employee could be having the solution to the problem, and empowering them and trusting them to do what they do best. And guess what? Organizations like ours have seen actually better results in 2020 than in the prior year. Yet it was all this leadership at play to really cutting through the unknown. So amazing developments in the space of leadership.
Thank you. If we move now on to the question of management education, and what our delegates, many MBA students and mature graduates, how the last 12 months has continued to shape the just-in-time learning you need to either be more successful in your job or find another job. Elisabetta, you recruit MBAs from all over the world, but at the same time, you're also responsible for your own in-house corporate university. What are the absolute up-to-the-minute skills you're now looking for and trying to teach your own managers as a result of this pandemic?
Yeah, I think that continuous learning is a very important concept, especially today. So what the COVID taught us is that thanks to technology, we can really learn in the flow of work, really learning every day, every minute, something important for our career, and for continue to develop our profile. And I think that what I want to share what we did in Santander, that I think it has been very, very successful. So what is important is to understand what are the critical skills and competencies a company needs to nurture in order to stay relevant for the future, to continue to grow the business, and to make these skills very clear to the employees. From the managerial side, of course, you need to develop leaders who have a different style, like servant leaders who have empathy and can really put themselves in the shoes of the employees and can really get connected. So the traditional leadership style is over, and you have to grow a new generation of leaders with different characteristics and different attitudes. So what I have applied in my tenure in Santander, developing this new ecosystem for learning and development, is to encourage employees to sit in the driving seat and to be the owner of their development and training, and to select what they wanted to do every day through the platform, the learning experience platform, in order to develop their profile, to do a better job in the tenure they have, but also to explore other areas. So to release creativity and curiosity and to acquire new skills in other areas. Because what is important today, and it will be more and more important also in the future, is to grow a new generation of leaders that are really flexible, owning a wide panel of skills and competencies. And I want technical skills with soft skills and leadership skills in order for them to go with the flow, to get adapted to the situation. The world is changing so fast that you need to develop in yourself the ability to get adapted and to be successful in different positions, in different environments. And this, so through the continuous learning and the new approach to learning, you can do that really in the flow work without impacting your productivity in a very natural and organic way. So people now learn through Google in any moment of the day, and this is the future for learning.
Thank you. Rob, just with your technical experience, a couple of years ago, I filmed an interview with Indra Nooyi, the chief exec of PepsiCo. And Indra said to me that she'd pay privately to have someone each year update her on what she needs to know about AI. Now, for many of us here today, technology is not a stronger suit. Finance, marketing, strategy, operations is. We know we need to know about AI, but how does someone who's not that gifted technically, but who's very ambitious in their career, get to know enough? And what should they be doing going forward each year to keep up to speed with AI and digital technology?
Well, Andrew, I think the first thing to say is you can pass my number to Indra when you get the chance. I'll be happy to give her that personal tuition anytime. But it is such a great question, isn't it? Everyone's talking about the need to become tech savvy, you know, the essential need to build technology into your career as an executive. Agree. You have to. It's an existential threat not to have an understanding of technology. Now this is where it gets really important, I think, for people listening in. And I've mentioned in my background, I'm not a PhD data scientist. You know, I'm not a machine learning engineer by 20 years heritage here. The reason why technology matters so much to people going into the leadership profession, I think, is because it has an implication on everything you do, from operations, strategy, people, the political environment you're working in, regulatory environments, and beyond. So what this means is I think you need to be able to know how to attract, grow, nurture, and oversee a team of technologists. It's essential you know enough about what they're doing to be dangerous, I guess. But it's not just about the technology itself. And let me just give you an example. My team, yes, of course, it will have the skills in there you'd expect, like data scientists, like engineers, like DevOps experts and beyond. But we've got people with product management experience in there. We've got people with terrific communication skills. For example, when we're deploying these technologies across our environment, we have to explain very clearly to the staff and our customers what we're doing, how we're using their data, how it's of benefit to them, how it's been tested from a kind of a regulatory standpoint, how it protects privacy. I've even got teams of ethicists in my team. So, you know, people that can look at the broader externalities of the technology, the unintended consequences, the philosophical leanings of our approach to technology. So when you start thinking about what a technology team looks like, I think you're looking at people that have got an understanding of all parts of your corporate environment, people with like David with people skills, etc. So I think for me, it's understanding the technological impact on your discipline, and then thinking about how do you get access to these skills. And the great news here, it's very easy to access. You can access loads of things online. I'll give you one example. The country of Finland have committed to upskill their entire country with AI knowledge. They've released something called Elements of AI, and this has seen a large proportion of their entire population start to learn about AI. It's now accessible to anybody online, so you can go to Elements of AI and do a free AI training course. What you can then do is go to a number of universities that are offering sort of a 6-week business primer on AI that's fairly inexpensive. And then really just start reading about it. I thought the word that Elisabetta said there was critical: curiosity. The more curious you are about this, the more you're going to be finding out more about it, challenging your colleagues in the tech team to understand what's going on.
Great, thank you. David, in the charity sector, we find more and more AMBA and BGA student and graduate members are interested in a career in a charity, you know, wanting to give back to society. And of course, charities are well run commercially now. You and I are both former commercial multinational directors, and now we've been running charities. But with the sector quite tight for budgets at the moment, what's the best way that charities can educate their MBAs, both as existing managers and those graduating? How do you keep up? How do you afford it?
Right. Great question, Andrew. I think it's common knowledge that the not-for-profit sector has been facing very strong headwinds over the last years, even before COVID. And of course, COVID made it worse, especially in terms of financing and funding flows, which are softer by day. And we know, of course, governments are spending less time, looking at the problems of other countries, and so they're, diverting as many of their funds hitherto being pushed into the multinational NGOs into sorting out their local priorities. And so I think what we're seeing as a trend across the sector is most of the players have actually been rethinking their business models to the extent of actually making very sharp, much sharper strategic and investment decisions around where do we put the little money we may have for superior impact. And it is paying off because one, we're seeing lean and smarter structures. We are seeing an increase in partnerships and alliances, which enable you to get more from less, which makes a lot of sense. I think there's been a lot of work in the past, if you ask me, but we are also seeing a lot of technology leverage to do things like fundraising, even service delivery, like in community health. Digital platforms are the only way to minimize the touch, because it's now low touch or no touch, if you think about it. Again, it's even better because there's a better reach now. And you can talk about it in the humanitarian situations where technology be used to disperse, financial and other forms of aid. But even better for sharp analytics and ability to report on impact to the donors as is necessary, because the donors are now putting on a private sector mindset around measuring impact. But we are also seeing something very interesting, innovation around how to build sustainability in your income flows. We've seen a number of them who have started social enterprises. And that is a sweet spot for MBA students, because there's a lot of space there for innovation. There's a lot of space there for entrepreneurial drive, build, and most importantly, to be innovative and creative around what it could be. And to be honest with you, the space is really large. We haven't even covered 25% of the ground that is possible. And so this crisis has got the sector to actually think how it could adopt a private sector mindset, but equally continue to deliver superior impact. So then, the MBA students have a real opportunity to shape the future of that sector, if you ask me. And again, we're seeing what you call frenemies coming out to play. Once upon a time, the not-for-profit sector was fighting the private sector, everybody thinking you're the enemy. But now there's a lot of collaboration, especially in building value at the bottom of the pyramid, because it's a win-win-win, if you want, 3 wins. And so, huge space for the MBA students to play.
A question for any of you who'd like to answer it. So many of our MBAs are graduating in the next 12 months. Typically, they're aged from late 20s to early 30s. Would you advise everyone that ultimately their career learning now is their own responsibility, and they should set an annual lifelong learning plan so that they're up to speed each year until they retire at 65, 70?
Yeah, if I might, I would pick this one. And I want to leverage on the long experience that I mature in J&J, because every year J&J organized that time a big event gathering together the best MBAs graduated or newly graduated in order to recruit people. And I still remember that these smart people we met, we started the interview, and the first questions they asked was, what will be my job title? What will be my place in the organization? How many years to get to the CEO level, And of course, it's absolutely, it is reasonable because these people are smart and they are ambitious and they want to have an idea of their career. So nowadays, I would say that this is not the case anymore. So on one hand, the lifelong learning is something that we have to incorporate, to metabolize in our DNA. So every day we have to put ourselves in a situation in which we can learn something more and something new, and really challenge ourselves, step out of our comfort zone. And the more it's a new thing that we don't know, but it's important for my job, the more I want to learn. And I want to learn from my peers or going through an upskilling or reskilling. So job title is not important anymore in the market today. What is important is what you know and what you can do and your attitude. So this implies a switch of mindset that I think that our audience has already understood, I think.
Andrew, if I may add on to what Elizabeth has just said, which I totally agree with. But I think, there's some realities which are coming to play, which we cannot ignore. I think the World Economic Forum, as well as the Big Fours, which Rob works for, have told us over the last couple of years that probably over 40% of the current skill sets are going to be useless or will not exist, in the next 3 to 4 years. And that's the truth. We see it already happening. And so it's interesting even how the labor market is evolving. And there are two questions I'm normally very keen to ask when I'm, interviewing, potential candidates, including MBA graduates. I already ask, tell me about the new skills you've learned over the last 18 to 24 months, And the other question is always, beyond the role you've applied for, which other roles would you possibly want to do in the future? And that talks a lot to the learning agility organization looking for in the workforce of the future, of course, who will be technologically enabled, but most importantly, agile enough to keep adapting with the future change. So it's exciting, but I think it's also going to be challenging to those people who are not ready to really manage their own personal business plan.
Thank you. And what advice would you give someone watching this afternoon who's not from a major multinational, but is actually a middle or senior manager in a small or medium-sized company that doesn't have the in-house training resources? How should they put their lifelong learning together?
I can speak to that, Andrew. I've worked in medium-sized business. I think it's more about time than having access to a huge in-house resource. There's so much available now around being able to upskill yourself, demonstrate that curiosity, and adhere to some sort of lifelong learning that I don't think an excuse is appropriate that you don't have a big team internally. So for me, it's more about committing time. It's, when I've worked in smaller businesses and even now, I will deliberately carve out time in my week to focus entirely on learning. I love learning more now than I did when I was in education. It felt like a necessity to get it out of the way, to get into the career track. And I didn't love learning. I love learning now. I can't read enough. It's podcasts for me. I love podcasts. I go out for a run after work. I'll do half an hour listening to a business podcast, newsletters. I can't stop. So it doesn't have to be formal curricula. I think it's about advancing your broader knowledge, awareness, and ability to, to be curious.
And do you think that passion for learning can overcome some of the worries about ageism? There's often been talk pre-COVID that once you get older, you're falling away because you haven't got the knowledge. Now people seem to value the experience of people who went through the financial crash and even the two Gulf Wars, because they've learned how to manage in difficult times. Do you think that conscientious learning is the secret to prolonging your career for those people who are older?
And I think we're all going to have to prolong our careers anyway, aren't we? With the pensions crisis and longevity itself starting to extend despite the pandemic. So we are going to have multiple phases throughout our careers where we reinvent ourselves. So I think that ability to constantly restock is a necessity, not a nice to have.
So I like I like the idea more than reinventing. I know that it is a very powerful word and gives clearly the idea. I like the idea of evolving. So what you said about continuous learning, being curious, and really having this will of learning every day something and enjoy learning every day something. This is what keep you up with the change and with the change of the marketplace, also the work marketplace. And of course, age can be a problem more in the past than today, because as you said, I agree with you. Today, there are more and more companies valuing the experience. So what a manager has gone through in the past and how this manager can manage the change, can manage a crisis, can manage a big turnaround or a breakthrough innovation, whatever. So yeah, I think the secret is keeping ourselves curious and really hungry to learn.
Thank you. If we move on to the final area before the Q&A, which is recruitment and employability. Amber and BGA, we're really the top 2% of business schools, and therefore, you know, the top few percent of students. But many of last year's MBAs have found it really difficult to get a job. And some have said to me, look, Andrew, we're applying for 20 jobs a day and still got nowhere. Starting with you, Elizabeth, what's your advice about someone now trying to get the job they really want in a very crowded marketplace where supply of candidates exceeds the demand for candidates? How should you go about it to get the job you want?
So the fact is that today the job market is very difficult. And these MBAs getting out of the schools have tough life. So this is a fact. I think that what is important is to focus on differentiation. So what is your differentiating factor? And you have to look for that and to offer to your potential employer something that is critical for the market, for the business in this moment. And in this moment, what is really critical is a bunch of skills and competencies that goes from being aware or being savvy in artificial intelligence. Everything is related to platform economy or platform dynamics, to go to the soft skills on the attitude. So you have to demonstrate. So companies now are looking for type of personalities on top of the basic skills. And I think this is so important, probably as it has been underestimated in the past, but today is really, really critical. And so attitude and openness, and also developing along the way a strong resiliency, being resilient in this moment for the pandemic, for all the problems we are going through and managing every day, and also for looking for a new job or for the first job is really tough, and you need to develop a strong resiliency and then find yourself the motivation to go on, to continue to believe in yourself and to differentiate from the others. If I may, I would like to share a little anecdote coming from my tenure in J&J when we recruited MBAs. So every time I was looking for the differentiating factor. And I remember one day I was sent to this event with the mandate of hiring 2 smart MBAs for Greece, for a market that was important for us in pharma and Janssen, but also was a very provincial market, because Greece has a language that is really a challenge. For instance, just to give this example. On top of that, there was a complication that we didn't have a job description because the job was totally new, and the company, for different reasons in Greece, was going through a thorough transformation. So we had to change all the executive committee, etc. I interviewed, I think, 150 people. And in the end, I landed on 2 guys that gave me the sense that they were the right person. So when I told them, so they asked me, what is the job title? And I said, no idea. And what is the job about? You know, I have no idea. This will depend on the general manager, on the CEO of the company. And so what I am expected to do, no idea again, but you will have the opportunity to be part of building the company up again. And I saw in the eyes of these two guys the sparkle. I called it the sparkle, and the will of putting themselves in the game and going embracing this totally disruptive and destructive situation in order to be there to make a difference. I think this can be an example of what is important for people facing a new job or a recruiting phase in this moment.
Supposing, Elisabetta, that you've got the technical skills and the commercial skills, you've got them through your MBA, but you haven't got that personality that is wanted that you talk about. And not everyone has got that charming, persuasive listening. What do you do if you haven't got the personality?
Well, I think that you can learn everything. And you know, what is important if you don't have this kind of personality, what is important is to start working on yourself and understanding what are the areas you have to develop. You have to get in touch with your depth personality to understand what are your strengths, what are your areas for development. So focus on an action plan to develop these areas. In this perspective, I think a good coaching can be really important, really useful for these people. Because you're right, sometimes you just need to develop what you don't have or simply you didn't have the opportunity to develop in the past. But this is possible. So the sense of the concept of mindfulness, so to be aware of yourself, to be aware of what you should develop, and to develop a kind of empathy in order to stay connected, to get connected with other people, and to create a strong relationship. This is something you can learn.
Really good advice.
Yeah.
Rob, you recruit real talent in big numbers. How does one become one of the PwC recruits over the next 2 years?
So, I mean, I just wanted to say how much I loved Elisabetta's story there about the spark in those two candidates' eyes. You know, that's just brilliant, isn't it? You know, it's really put a smile on my face. That if you can just, I don't know, box that up and sell it, you're going to do very well in life. But let's be honest, that this system is massively stacked against you as a candidate. Just to give you an idea of scale, just in my UK business, to hire 1,500 graduates a year, we will see way over 100,000 applications made. That's just in the UK, yeah? Forget about the rest of the world. So just purely on numbers, it's a very, very hard battle to get spotted. So for me, I think it builds back to you better about what you do, you know, in terms of soft skills and the rest of that. There's a phrase I think I've learned a lot over the last couple of years around personal brand. And you don't have to be an extrovert to develop a personal brand, but you have to put a lot of work in to get one. And what I mean by that is that the best people navigating this market at the moment, of course, they're sending off applications, 10 a week or whatever it is at the moment, but they're doing much more beyond that. They're developing a brand, developing this on social media. They might be running their own podcast. They might be writing thought leadership for industry journals. They're at conferences. The great thing about this market is the fact that conferences are free to attend. You can go to just about anywhere in the world virtually and network in virtual rooms. So you have to be doing all of this. You have to be doing so much more than simply just applying through the machinery. And, you know, this is becoming more and more automated. You know, we're looking at how do you process CVs. There's video interviews using AI being implemented. You can go all day long applying for these, but your hit rate is going to be microscopic. So dial it up on the other side of the agenda and take action yourself to kind of own your own career track.
Great advice. David, you must have recruited hundreds and hundreds of managers, you know, with your responsibilities at Oxfam. What's the secret of getting a management job in a charity over the next 2 years, all the other candidates?
Yeah, I think the story is not very different from what Rob has just shared. I think a couple of things here. Number one is we're seeing the marketplace changing drastically to the extent that, one, the traditional jobs are no longer attractive anyway, and for an MBA graduate to try to get into those only makes them me too's. And we're increasingly seeing opportunities that come by way of project roles, because whether they're social enterprises or startups, we're seeing roles coming up like projects. And I find that a very fantastic fertile ground for somebody to grow. Why? Because if you know what your strength is, that's your anchor. You go in there, differentiate yourself around it, but then the nature of project is such that you are part of a cross-functional team. Start learning your financial skills, project management skills, and the entire ecosystem of whatever the nature of the organization is. So that's a fantastic way of, even like Elizabeth called it, evolving your skill set to become that manager with the depth and breadth required for the future. You know, but there's also something realistic, rather, which is also happening. We're seeing a lot of investment in entrepreneurship by multilateral and again, a number of other private sector organizations which have what they're calling social enterprises. And what they are looking for those people, the kind of, you know, agile thinking like the MBA students have, to get into these startups, and because they are the best position to do this. And I've seen that in some of the projects where we've built partnerships at Oxfam with other, actors in, communities, and amazing how much money is going into youth projects and women projects. And the MBA students have an opportunity to, enter through that route. The MBA graduates cannot afford to position themselves as me too's. Doesn't help. And I think Isabella talked about personal branding in using some other words. But I think if you don't have a mentor, coach at this point, I think you better get one, because they help you to navigate, the VUCA world of employment if you want. And again, there are always those tricks which, people like Rob, like Elizabeth, myself could also share with you with what we know, especially if we play our coaching role.
Thanks all three of you. Some really great insights there. I thought we'd move now on to some of the questions that our audience are asking. First one from Kate Barnard. Hi team, how are you ensuring that your teams, whilst developing their own personal skills, which we've been discussing, are actually growing and operating together as a team? Elizabeth, would you like to start with that?
Yeah, this is a great question, because talking about upskilling, reskilling, and having said that this is crucial in this moment, as people leaders, we have to make sure that our team accordingly to these needs, to these requirements of upskilling, reskilling. And what I have personally done in this year is to identify together with my team members what were their areas for development, also in relation to the project that we were running, and giving them the possibility to acquire these skills in doing simply courses or shadowing other people knowledgeable in the specific areas, and also certifying themselves in specific topics that were important for the project. And in parallel, working hard in creating a team dimension. So we spent an amount of time in organizing workshops in order to develop our team spirit, how to work well together, how to develop a high-performing team, how to make sure that people could really have a deep awareness of themselves and understand what were the leverage for getting in touch with other people and work efficiently and effectively with the colleagues. So again, it's an effort, it's a journey, and you have to hit technical skills, professional skills, but also soft skills and attitudes and behaviors.
If I could just add to that, Andrew, I think the question was great, because I think it's clear to us in these corporates that there's people that have been here a long time that are very well connected. They've got very, very big reserves of social capital. They can pick up the phone, they can Zoom call anyone across the organization. It's the incoming generation we've got deep concerns about that maybe will struggle to build that team cohesion and connectivity and social capital. So we've really been focusing on that. And as Elisabetta said, I don't think there's a good answer yet, but the sorts of things we've been trialing have involved virtual reality, putting people into virtual worlds so it can help with introverts that can get connected. We've been doing a lot of reverse mentoring. We've been having a massive focus on things like well-being and thinking about how do we proactively help intervene. Big projects I'm running at the moment is we're deploying biometrics to the workforce, doing cognitive and psychometric testing, but looking at the correlation between that and things like diary load and how stressed they are and their working from home conditions to help. How do you describe this? It's kind of, it's empowering the individual to understand what makes them tick so they can work better with teams of people. So there's not a kind of a silver bullet with this, but you've got to keep trying different ways to start thinking about team cohesion in this virtual environment.
Very good. Now, here's a crunch question that I'd like all three of you to answer. And it's one that I think everyone involved in this conference right now is facing. And it's this, it's a question from Stacey Ann. How do employers look at certificates received from online learning bodies, such as edX and, such as edX and Coursera? Do they really carry any weight?
So let me throw in my view, and of course my colleagues will add on. So first of all, I think one clear opportunity for continuous learning, for getting the right exposure to what matters and what's trending in the world, is attending those kind of conferences, talks, and of course it's also great for building powerful networks that can which you can leverage, for achieving your agendas. So to be honest with you, I think the fact that you come armed with that kind of exposure, you have views and opinions about various subject matter, I think for me is a good foot in the door. And I would take it seriously because that talk to an individual who will come in and build internal and external networks, continuing to keep abreast with what's going on in the world. But again, some of those are really brilliant at sharpening your leadership skills. So I would say I would encourage those in a big way. It's also, however, about choosing, to use your time carefully, because again, you have to invest in the most high impact areas. Some of those talks are okay, but may not necessarily change your life. And so you may want to pick those few which you can proudly present to the employer. And yes, I'm one believer that they are very helpful and I would consider them.
David, do you think there's a difference between just doing the course and saying you've done it and actually going all the way through and getting the certificate?
No, absolutely. For some reason, many organizations are still traditional and they believe in evidence of did you really qualify. But the modern employer is really talking about what are the lessons learned over time, which you are able to translate into value creation for our stakeholders, And so the positioning or the framing of your experiences, which you garnered from such talks and conferences or courses, should really be not about the courses, because that's a vehicle, but what have you learned that has changed your life, and what value are you bringing, and how is it differentiating you from the other 3,000 candidates we may be talking to?
Thank you. Elisabetta?
Yeah, sorry, I really believe in formal training in academy, in the concept of academy. On the other hand, there is a lot of excellent stuff that you can go through online. So Coursera and all the MOOCs are fantastic and they deliver really good stuff. So I would say the good recipe is to have a mix of the two. I think that having a good online certification, certain external entity, accredited entity, is very good and can give you a lot of credibility. you can go through many courses in Coursera and other MOOCs, and they can give you the base of knowledge that is important to have and can give the employer the idea on how active you are in putting yourself in the situation of a continuous learner, no? So I would consider a mix of the two approaches as the best one.
Thank you, Rob.
I'd agree with all that. I think they are a good way of very visibly showing that consistent curiosity and willingness to commitment to learn, which more traditional types of education maybe are a bit historical or all or nothing. I would say, though, however, that it's not the be all and end all. You have to have so much more than simply some digital certificates. You know, it's a nice box to tick. I'd recommend doing rely upon them being the key difference in your differentiation.
Okay, thank you, all three of you. A technical one for you, Rob. Rob, what's your view on reputable online data science analytics training courses for unexperienced MBAs to try and enter into the technology sector? What doors could this training or certificate currently open to MBA graduates, and in which sectors?
Well, I think the first question to ask yourself is, how technical do you want to become? So, for example, I think there's going to be growth in roles where you are able to understand the impact of things like AI on business strategy, on workforce, etc. So you might just want to go so deep into it. And if that's the case, there are some good ones on Coursera. You know, have a look around some of the Udacity and Coursera courses, things like applied machine learning courses. There's a good one by Andrew NG. If you want to go further, there are some quite good ones which are about business, AI in business. So Oxford, Said Business School have one, MIT's Business School have one. There's quite a few around. You're probably looking at an investment there of around about $3,000 though to do that. And then before you're going further, you're thinking, do I want to really start applying this in practice, a master's in applied machine learning? So for me, I think actually in all reality, you can demonstrate a lot of prowess, a lot of knowledge through free resources. The one I mentioned before in Finland, for example, is perfectly good just to be able to acquit yourself very well in an interview situation.
Thank you. Time for one last question. It's a really good one that a lot of people would like to know today. My question is regarding geographical changes since COVID-19. Will African students like myself still have the opportunity to compete for positions in international companies? It was already difficult to qualify for opportunities in the West with visa requirements, etc. But now that the globe is closed, are we at an even greater disadvantage?
That's a great question, Andrew. And I would actually say, this is not a problem to solve. It's an opportunity to seize. Let me put it this way. First of all, because of the current reality, you know, most organizations are having or designing virtual, globally distributed workplaces, workforces. And as a result, actually, it is now easier to get individuals to apply for positions which, you know, don't actually require them to move countries. Just give you an example. Just a few weeks ago, I hired a very brilliant technical resource in Canada. We don't have a legal entity there. But the situation is such that there's no need for her to be in a physical location. And hey, she was the best. We just gave it to her. So actually, there are going to be more opportunities because of the hybrid workplace we are talking about, which is you can have those employees who never even want to come to the workplace or your physical headquarters, whatever you call it. But equally, technology is enabling you to work from anywhere, anytime.
Elisabetta?
Yeah, I fully agree. It's an opportunity, and it is true that, of course, moving around is very difficult today. But it is also true that technology can help, and you can mature experiences that are anyway appealing. And so it's not infrequent in this moment to see people getting into a new job without having put a step into the office because they are on the other side of the world. So also this barrier, geographical barrier, is going to disappear. because we are really facing a phenomenon in which this COVID pandemic, the situation, the technology that is helping us more and more is getting rid of all these barriers. And so I honestly, I don't see it as a problem, but as a big opportunity to leverage on. And again, it's a great opportunity for the company to enjoy, to take advantage of a huge diversity of culture, of backgrounds, of knowledge. It is really an asset. So being able to get good people from all over the world without thinking about the barriers, I think it's a fantastic opportunity.
Very good. David, have we got time for one more question? Because there's one great quick question I'd love the panel to answer. I'm not hearing back. So
yeah, I'm here. Absolutely, absolutely. Go ahead.
One quick question, because it's a great one. To all three of you, is it true that a CV gets looked at and rejected within 7 seconds? And what is the key when there's hundreds of CVs landing on one person's desk to make yours stand out in that 7-second period?
Yeah, I think this is quite true. Nonetheless, serious people taking care of recruitment are really dedicated to pay attention to every single CV. They can use technology to make a first filter, whatever, but they are really committed to give an opportunity to everyone and not to lose good people because they don't want to go through each one of the CVs. Again, what I think is important is to find the differentiator. What is the element that can really differentiate you from 100,000 candidates in that specific situation? And so I get back to the comments of my colleagues. So your branding, your personal marketing, the way you present yourself, your presentation letter, the first sentence in your CV can really make a difference in order to.
There should be, in your view, there should be at the top of that CV that tries to encapsulate you and your point of difference right at the top of the CV?
I would agree, yeah. If you consider the CV, I think this is an important element today.
I would totally agree. That CV is your first door into that organization or into the mind of the recruiter. If I cannot tell exactly what differentiates you on the first page of the CV, then you've lost half the battle. Because to be honest with you, you should, if you're as good as you're saying, you should be able to tell your story within the first page. And so let's take the design of the CV seriously. There are experts out there who can help you. But even online, there's so many tools which can help you free of charge to redesign a really winning CV. Take it seriously, that's my advice.
And just to finish quickly, Andrew, let's be honest, the system is broken. It won't survive. The entire recruitment process will change in the next few years. We've been saying that for a long time, Elizabeth, haven't we? It's taken a long time to break and change, but it's coming. So I would say don't rely just on CVs. I mean, obviously things like LinkedIn and other social media platforms are critical to make sure you're putting a good account of yourself forward. But back to that previous point I made, think about alternative ways to get through the door. Don't rely on the numbers game. You'll be waiting a long time.
Brilliant. Look, thanks so much, all three of you. Some really great insights. David, we're 3 minutes over, but we could go on for another hour here. But we must honour the time scale for everyone. So thanks to you, all three of you once again. David, I'm going to hand back to you.
Thank you. I forgive you. Thank you for a fantastic panel, everyone. It was really insightful, and again, lots of practical advice that I think people can take away straight away. So thank you, David, Rob, Elisabetta, and of course, Andrew, for chairing the panel. It's very much appreciated. So as I said at the start, this is the final session of the 2 days of the AMBA and BGA Festival of Excellence. I'd just like to thank again all our speakers who have given up their time to share their insight over the past couple of days. Our headline sponsor, Blue Prism, and our event sponsors, Advent Group, Barco, and Studious Digital Education, who have made this possible. Just to remind you all that you'll receive a recording of all the sessions, as well as your feedback forms within about a week. So look out for those. Your feedback's always really important to us to help us constantly improve and enhance our events. And I think that all that remains to be said is, from me, just thank you so much for joining the sessions this week, for all your amazing questions, for your comments, for chatting, and for really interacting and getting involved. We really hope you found this useful. So thank you once again, and goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.